Let's talk about your new show. It's on Channel 4. It airs next week. Crazy Delicious, Channel 4, Episode 1, Tuesday, a week today, 21st of Jan, 8 p.m. I saw it last night. It has amazing production values to it. It's an hour long. It's an epic. You tell everybody more. I did actually describe it earlier on, but off you go, you two.
Yeah, I mean, it's a competitive show. I mean, people compete, but there are standalones, so there's no elimination. Every show is independent, so you can watch them separately if you want them. And the three competitors, and then me, Heston, and Carla Hall from the US are judging it. And
why are you all dressed in white, like angels?
Because we're gods.
Is that what it is?
It was a little bit strange.
I loved it.
We were sitting on a cloud. When we the first day we got,
it's such a funny show.
We walked on set and looked at it, and this huge. It's like falling down a rabbit hole and walking into some kind of edible wonderland.
It is, yeah.
And we walk up the stairs, and this is the cloud where us gods, and we were looking at each other, thinking, "This is so surreal."
Yeah, and I called my wife and I said, like, they're calling me a food god in the UK, and she's like, they're calling you a god? Yeah, and then and I'm all dressed in white, and my wife says like a dentist.
Also, when not the most practical colour when you're having to eat beetroot. Roast beetroot crisps and beetroot puree and stuff.
No, especially when they're exploding.
Yeah, not and clumsy. Yeah.
Wait for the tandoori or the turmeric to bring it on. So this set, it is massive. This set is huge. It was filmed at Elstree, I think, wasn't it?
Elstree, yeah.
So that's why it's so big. It's a big soundstage, and it's the world's first completely edible cookery stage, isn't it? So
yes.
And this is part of the format of the show. So they go. The three contestants each week go foraging first.
Yes, they can forage on the set, so they could break stuff from the set and use it in their cooking. Yeah.
And the thing is, the point of this show is that I think that one thing that is uniquely human is the ability to imagine things that don't exist. So you could imagine a candy floss cloud attached to this building with a licorice string blowing in the wind.
Yeah.
And that imagination allowed us to become storytellers.
Yeah.
And without imagining things, we couldn't have created language and maths and telephones and houses and, all the wonderful things human beings have created.
Imagination is what separates us from all other species.
Yes. Exactly. And that imagination is what this programme was trying to celebrate, but it also made it difficult to judge because the craziness signifies the imagination, creativity. Yes. But unlike an
Instagram account.
If you have, because I didn't think about this until it was the show that drove it, that food blog sites have become incredibly popular. A food blog site is about the photograph that's posted up and it looks beautiful. But really, this should also have the same effect when you put the food in your mouth.
Yeah.
And that made it also quite difficult to judge.
You know who started all this nonsense?
Who?
You!
You are right.
Now you know what it's like to be a customer in one of your restaurants. You've suddenly been confronted with the same dilemma as the rest of us going, what the heck is this? You started it all, Heston.
It's true. Every second dish is like, Heston's like, I've done this. I did this at Feast. I did this 10 years ago. It was kind of like, in the end, he just stopped saying it because he was fed by his inventions. Yeah. But, yeah.
I think I may have seen your restaurant on the telly. But I've never been to it.
No.
But tell us about your restaurant in Sweden.
Well, I would say that me and Heston are the opposite types of chef. I'm a very analog cook. I don't use electricity. I don't use additives. I use a raw product and then I put it on the fire, on the grill, or on the embers.
I don't use additives, by the way. I just made that clear.
Okay.
See, we started.
Don't get too defensive, Heston. We all still love you. We adore you. We worship you.
I deserve everything I get.
Just give the Swede a go. Give him a bit of airtime. Go on. So you cook on wood?
Yeah, on wood, over fire. Yeah, my kitchen is completely analog. I don't have any electricity in the kitchen.
Have you been to his kitchen?
No, I haven't.
Can we all go?
I have been to his old kitchen, which was different to the one now.
Right.
I would love to go.
Should we go?
I'd love to go.
Should we do a thing for charity and we'll do an auction? We all go.
I'll be in.
Okay, we're running.
You're all invited.
We're running the Copenhagen Marathon on May the 17th.
Well, then you're only a 6-7 hour drive.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's Denmark and not Sweden, but we're on the right side of wrong, aren't we? There.
Yeah,
I'd imagine so.
Yeah, you can take the bridge.
So let's go to Heston first of all. Heston, what was the first signature not that you knew it at the time, what became a signature Heston dish? What was the first thing you came up with that was totally different and had everybody talking? You're equivalent of Picasso putting somebody's nose on the side of their head as opposed to in the middle of their
Probably
face.
it was 3 years before I opened the restaurant. Triple cut chips. That was the first.
Were you the first person?
That was my very first dish in 1992.
And how did that occur to you, that thought, which now seems de rigueur?
It was because I was wondering, as one does, why do chips go soggy? And I thought, well, the centre of a chip is light and fluffy and moist, and the outside crisp. If you leave the chip, then all of that steam from the fluffy centre goes to the outside and softens the crust.
Right.
So how can you keep the inside of a chip fluffy, remove some moisture, but leave enough behind to make it light and fluffy, but remove enough to stop it going soggy? And I tried everything I went to 3 cooking stages, and at one point I took a pin. I was pin pricking the chips between cooking. That didn't end up in the final sort of result, but that was before I'd even opened the duck.
And what was the most talked about idea? Would it be bacon and egg ice cream? Would it be the foie gras that looks like fruit? What would it be?
Well, the meat. I think the meat fruit at dinner was a biggie.
Snail porridge?
I think snail porridge. Although
Snail
it's probably
porridge,
of all the dishes I've done, it's not the one that I would put as a. If I look back on things that have a story behind their evolution and development, snail porridge was a fairly simplistic one.
Well, how did that come about?
My head chef Gary at the time had gone to New York to propose to his missus, and he came back beginning of service. I'm prepping. We had a local snail producer, this is when we were doing this is when it was more of a bistro. So I was doing a little cannelloni of snails, quite classical. And I said, did you go anywhere in New York to eat? He said, no, I just went to a Chinese restaurant, and gave me the menu. And it was a standard Chinese restaurant, translated in English. And one of the dishes, it was a fish congee, which is that fish cooked with like a rice, but it said fish porridge. And I thought, ooh, fish porridge? And then I did a bit of an Alice in Wonderland. I talked to myself, Heston, why do I think that was a bit weird? Well, I suppose we used to porridge at breakfast time. And I was working with snails, and you purge snails on oats, classically. So gradually
Purge snails on oats. Yeah. That's why we do this job, to hear sentences like that. Oh my God! Did you just say that on the radio?
I think I did. I
purge snails on oats.
Yeah.
Can we purge some snails today on oats?
I haven't got any.
Can we do
snails.
that at home?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can with the garden snail.
Anyway, sorry.
So then it evolved from there. And I ran out of steam then.
All right, Niklas, tell us about your first ever dish that got you noticed, and your most famous dish, if you look back on your own life, if you're allowed to do that.
Well, what really broke the restaurant and made it famous was that, I mean, it's actually a little similar to what Heston did at dinner. So he went back in history to look at old historical recipes in the old British cooking and then put them into a contemporary context on the restaurant. And I did it very similarly, but I did it technically. So I was thinking that what Swedish cooking, I mean, the majority of time was invented without electricity. So how was Swedish cooking before electricity was invented? So I went back in the history books, I went to the Royal Library, started researching about how did we cook in the older days in Sweden. And I found out, and at the same time, my wife was pregnant with our second son. And so I started cooking for her in cast iron pans and stuff like that. And then when we went to the midwife, she said, like, you had great iron content. You don't need iron tablets that you usually prescribe to pregnant women. So I thought, this is interesting. So actually, there was there's a reason why people cooked the way that they did in the older days, but they didn't know, right?
Yeah.
And so
they were close to nature, and nature knows.
Yeah, exactly. So I started using these techniques, and then I found old drawings of old tools and pans, and then I went to the local cast iron manufacturer in Sweden, and I asked him to put them to live again, and he found a lot of the drawings in the old archives, and so a lot of these techniques are now used in the restaurant every day, and I see them frequently being used in other places around the world.
Well,
actually, we did see it on the show.
Yeah,
we looked over from our cloud balcony down in the kitchen. I looked down, and I saw an implement one of the contestants was using, and I said, Niklas, this is one of yours, isn't it? And it was, it looks like the things used to put out candles in churches, with a little
what do they call those
cone
things?
on it.
Aren't they?
But
snuffers, are they called snuffers?
like a snuffer. Well, Niklas has this great technique. Uses oysters. You pour boiling fat into this cone, and then pour it over. It's wonderful. You just pour it over.
We're there, aren't we? We're sold. Okay, we're sold.
Yeah.
Will you do another book called Nature's Knows?
Yeah.
Nature Knows.
Nature
Knows.
Nature knows.
That's that, 'cause
just
nature
go out
does
and
know.
lick on a
Nature
tree, and
knows.
then you're fine.
Yeah, done. And because you forage a lot, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
I
and
love it.
so this show is.
But my son got sick this spring, so I'm a little more careful.
Was
now.
it a mushroom?
Yes. Well,
Yes, it was. Of course it was. It was
apparently-
definitely a mushroom.
yeah. Apparently, it can get really. You need to be careful giving. You can't give anything to your kids.
Do you know how careful you have to be over mushrooms?
Mushrooms, you really
Can I
have
tell
to.
you how careful you have to be over mushrooms?
die.
Okay. Well, yeah, I know that, but this is how careful you have to be. So the most famous and the best male mushroom forager in the world met his wife, who was the best female mushroom forager in the world, because they went foraging for mushrooms together. Yeah? And they got married because they loved mushrooms, and they both died of.
Food poisoning.
No, natural sources. But it's a good story. It could have been the way. Couldn't it? It could have been the way, because that's how dangerous mushrooms are.
And they're all Swedish.
No, they're not all Swedish.
The Chris Evans Breakfast Show with Sky.